I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zayas-Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark. Welcome everyone to Arcane Mark Dev Tools Pathfinder Society Quests. And thanks again to General Twig for the new sound that is on the intro movie, which he also created to begin with without the sound. So thanks so much. It's so great that there are already even people from the Arcane Mark community that are coming up with cool stuff that we can use for the Arcane Mark community. That's super awesome. This episode, I'm sort of going to be mostly just guiding you because Linda has pretty much 100% of the information. The design tools episodes, the designer maybe primarily the information. In the dev tools episodes for our developer, Linda has the information. And Linda has not only put together like lists from the open call to determine quest authors and developed several of the quests. She's the world's only author of a Pathfinder 2nd Edition Pathfinder Society quest.
That's true. The first quest, his product page went up recently. The Sandstone Secret for which is a repeatable quest for 2nd Edition. I wrote that one.
So if anyone else tells you that they've written one and they therefore know as much about writing it as Linda, then they're not actually telling you the truth.
We did just, I believe, assign out the second quest.
Oh, so I guess if that person wrote it really fast, then awesome. If you're watching this and you wrote it really fast,
she may well be watching this.
Good job. We're sorry it wasn't underwater.
Actually, I think it is.
Except it is. I don't know any of these things. That's why I'm just leading things around. It's not like that interview with Luis where I sort of knew what was going to be the answer and therefore was able to ask good questions.
I liked like Luis starting to chuckle because your questions were so leading. It's like, sure, it would be cool if there was a thing like this in this book. Can you tell us if there's a thing like this in this book? And then Luis is like, why, yes, there's a thing like this in this book. So, yeah, we were talking about him, we were chatting about it with some friends. It's like, yeah, you know what, we're not hard interviewers. We're basically just like, before the interview, it's like, hey, are there any questions you want us to ask you? Is there anything you don't want us to ask you? Here, let us pitch you softballs.
This is not hard-hitting journalism on Mark
No, it is not. It is not. It is a chance for folks to talk about the things that they're excited about and share their stories. So.
All right. So, with that being said, let's get started talking about Pathfinder Society Quests. And while you get started introducing the topic, I just want to ask the chat, how many people on here are either freelancers for Paizo or aspiring freelancers for Paizo who are just interested in Pathfinder Society Quests as in the way that they can serve as a sort of an in and a way into Paizo. So you can tell me that while Linda, you tell us, what is a Pathfinder Society quest? Some people don't know what it is. They're watching on YouTube. They're like, I thought there were scenarios. What is this quest?
So, a quest is the shortest form of adventure that we released for Pathfinder Society. It's designed to take approximately 1 hour to complete. So, a quest will generally have about 1 to 2 encounters in it, one major threat that's going to be like a larger combat or social encounter or another event, and then oftentimes you'll see 1 or maybe 2 minor threats that show up, like a trap or a hazard or things like that. So a quest is going to have a smaller scope. It's going to use 1 map and take place in generally 1 location, because the idea behind it is to have a at least mostly self-contained story that you can run start to finish over the course of an hour. Now, we've had 2 different major structures for quests that shake this up a little bit. One of the ways that we've done a fair number of quests in the past is a quest pack, which is a little bundle of 4 to 5 quests that share the same major story arc. And so those quest packs will have a background for the whole quest pack, and they'll generally have maybe 1 quest that goes first, one quest that goes last, and then all the other quests can be completed in any order. Or they may have an introduction for everything, several quests that can be completed in any order, and then a finale. So those generally take the format of, hey, NPC in the beginning says, I need somebody to do /fetch/find, 3 things. You can find those things in any order, and then the quest that can go in any order, each of those is going to represent doing or finding or achieving one of those things that can be done in any order.
And then at the end, it's like, what have you done? You found all of those things.
And then at the end, you have the finale. So that's a structure that we've used a lot, particularly because quests were being used as a quest pack was being used as a replacement for one of the scenario slots. So we wanted to release a content block that was that same size, and we were kind of inspiring that off of scenarios. We also had our original very short standalone quests that didn't grant experience points, because that was another thing that came up.
What was it? Ambush under Absalom, and Urge to Evolve. Were they both in Kobold Quarterly?
I think they may have been, yeah. Because an issue that we ran into was with those, and why we kind of went with the bundle model, is that a Pathfinder Society scenario by default grants 1 experience point. And so then you're looking at, if you have something shorter than that, it's going to have to grant a tiny fraction of an experience point. So I guess before I get too much into the weeds there, those are sort of the models that we had: the non-XP granting standalone 1-hour quest, and the quest pack of adventures that can be played in any order. And as you play those adventures, you accrue greater rewards. So I can get into sort of the structural model that we're doing for 2nd edition here, maybe real quick since I guess I've been talking about structural stuff.
Yeah, sure. Why don't you tell us about the 2nd edition structural model?
Yeah, so the 2nd edition structural model is to use standalone quests that do grant XP. So in order to facilitate this, a quest has become the basic unit of XP. With 1 XP for quest, and then a standard scenario would give 4 experience points. So that way you can have quests as standalone adventures. So my focus here is going to be a little more on the quests as standalone adventures model rather than the quest pack, because we've completed assigning all the scenarios we're going to for 1st edition at this point. So if you're looking to be writing a quest in the upcoming months, and you are looking at what's going to be new and shiny and available for play, it's really going to be working off that standalone model.
That makes sense.
So I guess I talked a little bit about what is in a quest. So I'm going to talk about sort of the structure of a standalone quest from beginning to end. So a standalone quest is going to start with a little bit of adventure background to set the scene. If you're familiar with a Pathfinder Society scenario, or even if you're not, it's going to be a short introduction to the story to give the GM enough background to understand the context. And this is going to be pretty much the one place in the quest that may contain information that the players aren't necessarily going to have a way to find, but it's important to have that both so to allow the GM to be able to sort of answer questions that may come up during the game, and to give them context for if the PCs go a little bit off sort of the expected rails. And the introduction section, the adventure background for quests, is necessarily short because you don't want, first, it to take up a lot of space, and second of all, you don't want to be giving the GM a lot of extra things to think about when they're sort of running a short adventure. So you start with the adventure background, and then you're going to
wait. Quick question
yes.
that they have about Numbat is wondering where the pole is. So Numbat, if you want to get to the pole, it sort of pops up on you, but if it doesn't, you need to go to the bottom middle of the screen where there's a little green square with goggles and say that you're okay with Streamlabs. That should cause there to be another square just sort of near Linda's shoulder that is her left shoulder, but you see on the right of the screen, there's just this other like grayish square with the Arcane Mark
It's here.
logo in it. Yeah, where Linda's hand is. And when you click on that, there's a current poll. Also, usually when you enter the screen, it pops right up. So just wanted to tell you about that, Numbat. Also, Linda, before I send this out, is this the correct punctuation on this?
Yeah, yes, that is.
Okay, because I didn't remember if they had another
Also,
dot or a
yeah,
dash.
yes.
Should I actually send this?
Yes, go ahead and send it.
Okay.
But I will have one more thing to add.
All right,
in
I'm
as well.
sending this to
So,
chat.
Marcus just sent to the chat my Paizo.com email address, which is a great place to send an email if you're interested in writing for Pathfinder Society, or for the Pathfinder Adventure Card Society, or even for Starfinder Society as well. I can pass information along. When we're getting requests to write from folks that we have not worked with in the past, it's a great idea to send a writing sample. If you don't, we're going to be asking for one, generally, so that we can get a sense of your writing, and as well let us know what your experience is with third parties, and what your experience is with society play. Because generally, if you're going to be writing for society, we would like you to have some experience playing and/or GMing for society. GMing is important as well, because you then are like actually reading the scenarios and getting into those. So having a bit of GM experience, and certainly having the player experience too, is valuable, because then we'll know that you have a sense of the kinds of things that scenarios are trying to accomplish, and sort of like how challenging they are, what the rhythm of the adventures is as well.
Woo! Thanks for the bits, Nitrace. And the writing sample is super important because it also not just shows that you can write, but also what you like to write. So think about what you're sending from that regard. Like, you send something that is all about like the deep, dark vastness of the sea, then you might have to wind up in a cage match with Kate for underwater adventures. So,
Kate doesn't have a monopoly in underwater adventures.
Ron wrote that one.
That's true. She just earned first dibs.
All right. So I'm sorry I completely derailed you with Numbat's question and the other stuff. You had just gone into talking about what the introduction to a quest is. And it sounded like you were going to go through the quest point by point to show the anatomy of a quest, which very good idea. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. But I also want to respond to Farandor's point. Being a GM for Pathfinder Society is a much lower stress bar than your own home game. That's definitely true, because Pathfinder Society GM, and you can also GM for, it's not just the conventions and game stores. You can GM Pathfinder Society for your friends as well. You can.
We started with our home group.
That's how we started as well.
Our home group had just our AP had fallen apart. And we decided that we would play a few Pathfinder Society scenarios to pick up new players. I'm going to maybe slightly give a side opinion to Farandor and Linda's opinion. In terms of your effort, how much stuff you have to do, putting things together, it's a lot less prep, and it might be a lot less stress. There are elements of GMing for Society that could be more stressful for some people, especially if it's not for your home group. Like, if you're going out, you meet new people, you don't know who's going to be there at the event. So, it's not, it could have things that are a challenge, but it also could be a great way to, like, Linda, would you say that Pathfinder Society was, like, a good thing for you to help with anxiety and learning
definitely.
Meeting the new people, and hey, they're friendly, and hey, this works out. So.
Yeah, exactly. And I find that, Pathfinder Society players tend to be, like, really understanding and supportive. You're just like, hey, I'm a new GM and I'm looking to get into this. Particularly if you're playing publicly, it's good to. I find that it's comforting to sort of play with those folks first. Then you get to know them, and then they're all excited for you when you step up into that GMing chair for the first time. And it's also a matter of time commitment. It's a lot more commitment to construct and build your own campaign than it is to say, okay, I'm going to run one like 4 or 5 hour scenario, or I'm going to run like a 1 hour quest for you guys. And then it's like, okay, well, you can do it whenever it fits into your schedule. You don't have to come up with the story yourself. We've already done that for you. So I think it's a really great way for people to get into GM.
So people are asking, like Eltra is asking, I live in a big city and I still can't find Pathfinder Society play around here. And I wanna point out, anybody can start running Pathfinder Society for their local area. And in fact, just all it takes to become to potentially become a venture agent, which is the lower level of venture officer. Venture agent is just someone who wants to run in the local community and is consistently going to be there, and you get all of the scenarios for free. Yeah, you do have to work with some other venture officer that is above to get you instated and show that you have good intent and you're going to organize in that area. But all right, Elftro points out that in Elftro's area, the stores with tables don't want Pathfinder Society Organized Play. What are some places people have done it before? There have been libraries, certain pubs or restaurants, as long as your group is good about ordering things that have big tables, are actually very friendly to having people game there. What else?
Fandor mentioned cafes.
Yeah.
Also,
cafes and libraries. There you go.
Also, like if you're a student, whether you're in college or you're in high school or whatever, you can often find like the ability to create clubs or use other classrooms, and things like that. Kitsune Warlock mentioned condo community centers, universities. Once you become comfortable with a group of people, you could even have them, or if they're your friends, you can play at your house, things like that. So really anywhere that you can find a table.
So Night Fox asks if we suggest attending a Pathfinder Society game first as a player before stepping up to GM. It can be helpful, I would say, but if there's none in your area and you want to start it, just make sure to read the guide. And honestly, even if you attend a game, you might not learn as much about the guide as if you read the guide. So if you read the guide carefully and just try to understand what's in it, then that can often be enough. It's just like the guide has a few idiosyncrasies that are different than normal, but other than that, it's just that, and then you download some scenario and run it. When I ran our first one, I had played a few games at Gen Con, but honestly, some of those were the first Gen Con ever with Season 0, and they didn't run the rules right according to the guide, so I learned most of it from reading the guide and just starting out with my players. We kind of played it pretty differently than standard, and sometimes I just added enrichment to the in-between scenarios. I was curating a Shadow Lodge arc that had all of the stories that would lead up to Eyes of the Ten for my group, and it was pretty fun.
Can someone, when we say the guide, the Pathfinder Society Guild Guide, can someone in the chat throw a link in?
Although, that's a link to the first edition guide. The second edition guide doesn't exist yet.
Does not exist yet? We are currently writing it. And Numbat makes an excellent point there. Society-specific forums are a great place to ask questions and receive support, and we also have a thriving online community.
Linda does have Twitter, but she doesn't use it very much.
I technically have a Twitter account, but I haven't
liked all of the Arcane Mark announcements on Twitter.
And I follow some some gaming and math related.
Math.
Yes, because I majored in math and was going to totally go into math education and all that sort of thing. So thank you,
Biscuit Goat. The guide for Society Play for the new edition is coming soonish.
I don't know exactly when that's going to be coming out because we are still working on that.
It's coming soonish, hopefully before the season starts, and I'm pretty excited about the formatting changes that have been discussed for that. It should make it a lot easier for me to use and navigate, and easier for you guys to update. So
yes, definitely, because we've been discussing some formatting changes to make that a lot more adaptable and a lot more user friendly. And another one of our main goals with the revised guide is to shrink the guide, to reduce redundancy, and to start it off with a quick start guide that's going to be a handy reference that people can read so they don't have to read, because the guide unfortunately sort of suffers from the problem that over the years it becomes more and more like a technical manual because people ask all these specific questions and you want to have answers for them. So what we're really looking to do is to make sure that the guide sticks to sort of the basics that people are going to want to know. It has a quick start guide in the beginning, which is just a few pages long that you can read to find everything that you need to know to get to get started as a player, and then you don't have to read the rest in detail if you're just starting out. And then it'll have like sections for GMs, and it'll go into more details about like what kind of fancy rewards can you get and things like that. And then to move more of those like ticky-tack little questions and things like that over into a fact to make the guide more approachable. And that's the revision process that we're really diving into now. So, but I guess that's sort of a different topic.
Sure. Quick starting with Pathfinder Society absolutely is very associated with quests, and that quests are honestly a great way to get break the ice and get things started. And we might talk about that later in the episode. But I keep interrupting you when you try to
oh yeah, so I was talking about the anatomy of the quest. I mean, these are all excellent questions, and I like that we can sort of just be free form and have a conversation here. And that's one of the great things about when folks ask questions, and there's been a lot of great posts in the chat about getting started and things like that. And we're just trying to highlight those. So I guess where was I? I was at sort of the background. The next thing that you're going to see is a summary or synopsis. And someone F3 Cubed asked if it's the same for Pathfinder First Edition and Second Edition. There are sort of like a few very minor changes, but it's basically the same. And I'm sort of going through this from my Second Edition file that's up right now, so I can sort of get into that a little bit. So we have the summary, which is now called the Adventure Synopsis. Huge change. But
synopsis. That's so fancy sounding.
Yeah, synopsis. And of course, this is what I'm looking at here is my pre-development file. I am a developer, but that does not mean that my stuff does not need development, because nobody, no matter how experienced you are, is going to write something that doesn't have its mistakes and things that can be improved.
Not nobody, not know how.
Yeah, exactly. So the adventure synopsis is basically, hey, it's a summary of what happens in the adventure. Where do the PCs start? What are the things that they do, and where are they going to go? So the summary or synopsis should have it should have the major story beats. It should have, if there are major decision points at the PCs, if there's something where the PCs could fight this group of people, or they could negotiate with them, and that's going to make a substantial story difference, then you'll wanna spell out those differences. But you don't need, the summary is not the place to go into every single possibility of everything that could happen. It's just hit the major things. So it could be, like after the PCs contend with the guards, then they can enter the rest of the palace and yada yada yada, as opposed to saying, if the PCs negotiate with the guards, then they learn about the location of the secret room automatically. If they fight the guards, then it could cause other guards to notice and come over. This would not be where you would get into that detail. You're gonna want your adventure background for a quest to be a most 300. The background section for a quest about most 300 words. For a scenario, you're looking at more like 500 words, and the summary should be substantially shorter than that. You're probably looking at more like 200 words, regardless, for the as a cap for the quest or the scenario, unless you've got something really complicated going on. And it's important to keep in mind when you're writing these sorts of things to keep them trim, both because it's less for the GM to read, and also because you as an author have a limited word count. So spending it all in sort of that summary and background means that you have less space to write cool stuff that GMs and players are going to get to interact with. So then you have sort of the getting started section, which is where you tell you set the scene, you tell where the lodge is, like where do the PCs start. You need to give them that information. This is also if your adventure links back to a previous adventure and there's chronicle sheets or other things that players may have done that influence what's happening in this scenario. You're going to want to have that up here at the beginning so the GM can check that and know what's going on.
Makes sense.
And so we have with the getting started. Then we have the you're going to have some read aloud text, and that's going to be sort of read or paraphrase this text to get started. So that's going to have your adventure captain, whoever else is telling the story. So in the read aloud text, you're going to want to in the read aloud text, you're going to want to have the key information that a sensible mission briefer would give to the PCs. So if there's something that the venture captain obviously knows, and withholding that piece of information could possibly harm the group, don't do that. We don't want venture captains
season 0 and 1.
We don't want the venture captains to come across as people who are like, yes, I'm sending you into the tomb, and the tomb is boarded with a deadly trap, but I won't tell you about the deadly trap that I clearly know about
unless you ask me about it.
Is the tomb boarded with a deadly trap? Why, yes, thank you for asking. If you didn't ask me good questions, I was just going to let you stumble into the trap. Lol. So, yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. So if there's key information that the venture captain or the mission briefer would know, include that in the read aloud text. And below the read aloud text, you're gonna have questions that the PC can ask the mission giver. So again, these questions, they should not be, I have to ask this person this very specific question to find key things from the mission. They should be ways to find other details that could be useful, to delve up additional background, to give initial motivation to some of the NPCs that maybe the venture captain didn't feel was crucial to give.
And while we're into Lidge's pet peeves with early scenarios, which those questions are on, here's another one not to do. Have the adventure start with the thing saying, "It's sweltering hot in the heat of the jungle." It makes you remember back to when a mission briefing happened several weeks ago that for some reason is not where we're starting, but we're talking about you being in the jungle now. And oh wait, back in the briefing, Venture Captain Drendel Drang said, "Hello everybody, it's now several weeks ago and we're confused about what time it is."
Yeah, because while immediate risk can work well for a lot of storytelling, it's rather challenging in scenarios because the players need to have the chance to prepare to ask their questions. So if you start a scenario with immediate race, then players might be like, well, wait, I would have bought these things for the jungle. Wait, I would have had a chance to get to know things. And so I find that when I'm running in media race scenarios, I pretty much universally, because it's sort of the reader paraphrase thing, I pretty much universally scrap the immediate race, jump back to the mission briefing, and create a mission briefing, and then jump forward to that after the players have had a chance to ask their questions and to buy their gear.
Also, even if you let them buy the hot weather gear, sometimes it's like, after weeks in the riverboat, it seems like time's running out as you come into the jungle. The remove go back to the briefing. "Hello, 9th level adventurers with teleport. Today we're going to go on this briefing, and then we're going to go on a mission that's time essential. I've gotten you a very slow riverboat that I've chartered." And then you'd be like, "Well, actually, I teleported, but I guess the introduction said that I didn't."
Yeah, because that's another thing that it does, is that it can well strip a chance for players to choose things, and also strip agency in terms of how they approach things. So I really like to start with sort of that classic, "Hi everybody, here's the mission as we know it." And then that brings up another point, is another thing to include in the introduction is both what kind of gear the PCs can purchase. So if they're in a big city, it's just like, yeah, they're in a big city. But if that's restricted because they start the adventure in a small town and things like that, you want to mention that. Or like, let's say that they start the adventure, a common one might be starting on Calistro Bennery's ship, the Grinning Pixie, and then we'll say, the quartermaster has things for sale has all items for sale that are worth up to like 2,250 gold, or whatever statement it has for her quartermaster. So if there's differences in purchases or access, you want to put those there. And also you want to put in, how do the PCs get to that next location? So are they taking a boat? Are they teleporting? Is someone coming in to teleport them? How is that working? And you also want to make sure that makes sense to the mission. So if you have a glaringly time-sensitive mission, and the PCs are going by a slow riverboat, or the PCs are like taking a ship around to Tian Sha, or they're like scaling over the crown of the world or whatever, make sure that the venture captains are sensible and that it makes sense for the story in terms of how they reach the location.
For instance, you could say, "We need to get there now. Let's break the tapestry to teleport there immediately." But then they broke the
tapestry. Why? Pathfinders, you did that too many times and the tapestry was sad.
That will lead into interactive specials later on.
or that has led to interactive specials that have been
Yes,
put
I
into
mean
place.
it'll lead into Arcane Mark interactive specials
Oh
later
yes,
on
we'll lead to
to
the
talk
we'll lead
about
to
a
the topic
previous
to talk about a
interactive
previous
special.
interactive special. That's true.
Yep.
We're
All
not
right.
going to get into that too much now, but so that's another thing. So just to summarize, for the introduction, you want read aloud text. You want read aloud text in which the mission briefer gives the information that they have. You want questions. You'll often want what kind of, if there's anything weird about what the PCs can purchase and have access to. You want how they get to the location. And there's one more thing that you'll have in a lot of cases, which is skill checks to know more information. So in scenarios that you've seen so far for Pathfinder Society, Starfinder Society, these have a general format where it's like the PCs may know more about the history of this ruin. PCs learn all information with the DC for which they exceed the DC of the check. We have the standardized wording in there, and then it'll be like 10 plus. This ruin sure has been in the desert for a long time. It looks like it's ancient Osiriani or something. 15 plus. This ruin is connected to the reign of the old pharaoh Sekhmet III. And the old pharaoh Sekhmet III was known for his connections to undead. 20 plus. This rumors from people who walk around in this ruin say that they hear strange sounds that indicate that it may be haunted, or something like that. So you'll have that kind of format of scaling up DCs. So this changes a bit once you get into the second edition paradigm, because in second edition you have the concept of critical failure, success, and critical success. And you'll see this in our playtest scenarios, and this is something that we'll be carrying forward as well, where instead of writing these checks with these fixed DCs, we have a check, and then there's something that you find, information that you find that's sort of baseline information. There is often going to be a critical success where you gain more information, and then a failure doesn't give you anything, and a critical failure gives you something that is false or misleading in a way that could be humorous or troublesome in the course of the adventure. So like, if for example, if you have a check and it's like, and it's about an important NPC that you're trying to befriend, for example, in this adventure, and then the success may tell you, yes, this character.
He loves chocolate.
This character loves chocolate.
But it actually killed his favorite dog.
Hold on, yeah. So like the critical failure would be like he loves chocolate when it actually like killed his favorite dog or something like that. The critical failure is something that may cause you to put your foot in your mouth or maybe make an ill-advised decision. And this comes back to a little bit the concept of secret rolls, secret checks, and things like that, where the GM would roll so the players wouldn't necessarily know whether they were the one who got the critical failure. And with second edition play, very much with secret checks, the handling of secret checks is in the GM's hands to decide when they want to have that be a secret roll, or when they want to have the players roll, sort of based on sort of their preferences, the players' preferences, and how things go. But by default, for those kinds of things, you're generally going to want to have those be secret rolls, so the players don't know, like, ooh, is that the critical, which one of these was the critical success or the critical failure, or things like that. It creates an interesting mystery, and I've had a lot of fun with critical failures on knowledge-y type checks leading to super awkward situations in roleplay and things like that. So I think that covers all of the pieces that you're generally going to find as a part of a getting started section. Next, after that, it's going to be a little more different. Those are the sort of most formulaic. This is how we start. It's going to be a little more different in terms of what encounters you have in your adventure. But the next thing after that often is if you have any overarching systems, like if you have or information that that the GMs are going to need to know, things that they're going to need to track throughout the adventure and things like that. This is a lot less common in Quest, but you can have them in Quest. My Quest does have hey, here's some other information you need to know before you get in about some ways that this quest may vary, because this first quest is a repeatable quest, and it's got some differences that can happen with the encounters, and so that's sort of explaining to the GM how this structure functions. So this is going to be your place for information that you want the GM to know before you get into the encounters, overarching stuff. Rico the Bold asks, are scenarios and whatnot going to start including fake info for critical failures or players with dubious knowledge for PF2? I'm not going to talk about whether or not certain feats stayed in the final, but yes, we are going to be including dubious information. Not necessarily in every case, but if we come up with something that would be cool,
Hey, hold
we'll put
on.
that in there.
Rico just failed a recall knowledge check about dubious knowledge, so I'll give you two pieces of information, one of which is true and one of which is false, about dubious knowledge. So first, dubious knowledge is in the final book. Second, dubious knowledge is not in the final book.
Oh, you. Oh, you. Considering we're like us, with chases being in the 2E GNG make them more plausible to show up in quests. Certainly, having things in a it's more plausible to have rules when there is an easy and natural reference to it, and they don't need long reprinting and things like that. So I would say yes, having things in a published book that we can easily refer to makes them easier to use. So let's see. So after that, we get into sort of the standard. How do you get to the location section if you have it? In a lot of cases, you may just have like, hey, you teleport into this location, and then you arrive, and the journey proceeds without incident. You know, that phrase pops up a lot. But if the journey does not proceed without incident, or the PCs find some cool NPCs that they talk to along the way who may have additional information, or they need some checks to get there safely or quickly, or other things like that, this is where you'll have your sort of getting there section. And then once you get to the place, in a quest, and we're talking about quests here generally, in a quest, the place is going to be one location, it's going to have one map, and that map is going to be a pre-existing flip mat, map tack, or flip tile piezo product, because quests do not order custom maps. This is for several reasons. One of them is probably, I guess, the most relevant to you guys would be that we know that they're going to be run in a lot more places. They're going to be run more quickly, things like that, and we want to make sure you only have an hour. And so we don't want people to have to be like custom drawing the maps during that. We don't want people to necessarily be creating new maps for areas that may be used more cursorily or more quickly with fewer encounters in them, just because we don't necessarily have that time in the quest. And it also allows us to have the budget to actually like order art for them, because they're shorter scenarios or shorter adventures, and we need to keep those sorts of concerns in mind too.
So it's in the product thread. Yeah. But why don't you tell just the people, the Arcane Art community, in case they didn't check it, what flip mat, map pack, or flip tiles should they be all buying the copies of to make sure they have it for your quest?
It's Desert Ruins, I believe. It's the desert one. I can double check that.
The desert one.
No. It didn't end up being. Sorry.
It didn't end up being Desert Ruins. It did not end up being Desert Ruins. Okay. I'll go buy Desert Ruins. Suddenly, the share of Desert Ruins.
Suddenly, the share of Desert Ruins went down. It is. Let's see. I believe this is. I'll look it up and I'll post it in after. I believe is this Ancient Dungeon?
It's the one with the blue, green, and red circles.
It's the one with the blue, green, and red circles at the top of it that has like the sort of the moss-covered pillars and things like that. I deal with so many maps; they all kind of blend together.
The answer is, even Linda doesn't remember, but it is on the thread.
I am. Oh no! Here we go. The map is a crop version of Flipmat Classics Ancient Dungeon Side A.
It is Ancient Dungeon, but it's a smaller section. Sometimes in quests they'll crop it so that it's just easier for you to see what you need and not have this whole part of the dungeon that you don't need.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And this is why I have my quests and my materials over here, so that I can reference them and be sure that I don't forget anything.
Yep, Linda's reading off the outline of a product all the way through, while I make random side comments every once in a while. It's like flashbacks to every PaizoCon panel that Jason runs.
If you want to talk about more stuff, just let me know.
That's not a bad thing. Jason gets a lot of information in a very short amount of time by going through chapter synopsis of every book.
I had originally had this on Desert Ruins until I realized that it didn't quite have the right orientation of rooms for the plan I was going for, and so I flipped it out to another desert colored one. But we'll still be using. We're going to continue to use maps. Basically, if it's in print, then it's available for us to use. And if it's in print and it's not in the classics line, then rest assured that we are continuing to continuing to find ways to use those. Like when you see us having a surge of like, we had a fair number of monasteries for a while, so then it was just like, okay, you'll notice scenarios that are like, ah, yes, this is going to be on the monastery or things like that, because we really do try to make sure that people can get use out of all of the products that they have. So at this point, you've journeyed to the location, you've reached your first encounter area. So what do we need to know about this area? So we're doing a quest, and that means that we're not going to have a ton of encounters. So we don't necessarily want a map that's like super sprawling. We may want to cut areas off the map, or we may want to have areas that have short descriptions. So like if this is in a haunted house or something like that, for example, if it's a multi-floor one, you might use one floor. If it's got like everything that's on the map, you might crop the map, or you might just have short descriptions of a variety of rooms that say like, oh yes, these are the bedrooms. There's nothing in here but dust, or things like that, because you do need to sort of keep things moving in terms of the space there. So you've selected a map for your area, and you need to describe some of the features that are not on the map. So the features that GMs will ask for if you don't tell them. What is the height of the ceiling in all of the rooms, and what is the light level? Also, if there's difficult terrain anywhere, let them know about that. Those are sort of the three most common things that if you don't say, that the GMs are going to notice and they're going to ask you. So general good standard format for that is sort of like at the light level, unless otherwise stated, the light level in this dungeon is this dungeon is bathed in dim light and the ceilings are 15 feet high. And then boom, done, you're good by default. If you have other features that are generally true about the area, that are relevant, such as, oh, the doors in this area are locked with simple locks. The doors are made of wood. Or things like that are overarching, and so you don't want to have to keep saying them over and over again, this first section is going to be a good place to put it.
The doors taste faintly of vinaigrette.
Who's going to be licking the doors?
Pathfinders.
Okay, so doors tasting faintly of vinaigrette is a good example of an extraneous detail. Unless there's a good reason why you would need to put in like details like that, like the GM's just going to be like, why? Why did you tell me this? And if they have... And, but you know what? If you have a player who's going around licking all of the doors and you want to decide that they taste faintly of vinaigrette just to get that...
Hold on, I'm just going to point this out.
Yeah?
Creighton Shane would do that.
Yeah, Creighton...
He's the master of scrolls.
Yeah, but Creighton Shane is not a typical Pathfinder. Let's just say that.
But he's the master of scrolls.
Don't just do what Creighton Shane does, kids.
WWKSD.
Because I don't know what Creighton Shane is on sometimes, but yeah.
Life and flowers.
Yeah, Rigo the Bull says, because it's a small demiplane that wraps around, you can see the back of your head from these 3 spots. Yes, that's definitely something that you would want to tell GMs right up front. And Ferendor's List, the science character, needs that information. Well, but the thing is that Ferendor's List, the science character, then will be relying on their GM, because an adventure can't contain everything, and that's why you have awesome GMs and who can improvise and come up with these sorts of things. Why does everything taste like vinaigrette? Well, apparently Rocket Lettuce says that it tastes like vinaigrette. Well, maybe Rocket Lettuce is thinking of salads. Maybe everyone's been eating salad in bed, and that's why that's why their bed sheets taste of vinaigrette. Okay, so so considering Rorok has some good advice, stop licking the dungeon. You don't know what's been there. There could have been green slime here before you. You just don't. Okay?
See, every time I say something, it just digresses with dungeon licking. So that's why we should just let you explain the quest.
Don't assume that your players are going to lick the dungeon, but do account for common ways for players to approach encounters, such as combat, sneaking, and like diplomacy and things like that. So that's sort of in terms of detail and things like that. So you're gonna have your encounters. You're gonna have your different areas. In a quest in particular, you're likely to have a thing where you're just gonna be doing quick descriptions of areas. So you may be like, area A1. This is a bedroom. Its bed sheets do not smell like vinaigrette. Oh God, why do I have to specify this? Area A2. This is a privy. There is nothing of value in this room.
It definitely doesn't smell like vinaigrette.
It definitely doesn't smell like vinaigrette. Don't stick your head in the toilet. Area, I don't...
Don't lick it, even if you are wondering whether it tastes like vinaigrette.
how many licks does it take to get to the center of the dungeon? Night Fox asks.
A one, a two.
The answer is if your PCs are figuring that out,
Three.
then the rest. If one of your PCs is figuring that out, the rest of the PCs should probably be staging an intervention. So what else?
Maybe they worship Urgathoa.
Why?
Or Ravaga. Nom 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 nom.
All food is the best spell ever. Kitsune Warlock says yes. In the instance of all, you cast someone casting all food, you can indeed lick the dungeon to.
Or stone to flesh, and then you eat the dungeon.
No. Oh God. Okay, we're going back to the scenarios now.
Okay.
All right. So like I said, for a quest, you're probably gonna have one combat encounter and maybe like one or two other things. And so keeping in mind that you have one encounter. This encounter can be a bit more difficult than you may have for a standard scenario. This is going to be more. You probably want to scale this around the boss level difficulty for a scenario of its length to give the PCs a good challenge to fight against. Other than that, you have a boss encounter that's somewhere in the region. You also generally want another thing for the PCs to interact with. So this could be a trap, this could be a hazard, this could be a social encounter and things like that. Generally, you're looking at it about a 1 hour runtime for a quest. If you have a major encounter, which is an encounter that's generally considered to be challenging for the PC's level, we generally budget 30 to 40 minutes to complete those. So that's a good idea for how much extra space that you have for things. So like a trap or hazard, if it's a simple to go into second edition parlance, if you go at a simple hazard, that may be over like that. Whereas if you have a complex hazard, that's probably going to take a complex hazard and an encounter that's probably going to take all your space. Whereas if you have a simple hazard, maybe you could have multiple simple hazards.
How do you budget it if the encounter is itself more complicated? Like you're doing some kind of martial arts fight where you have to hold back and show off this weird martial arts style to convince people that it's awesome. In like a dojo slam.
So we do have a quest like that. I would say that if you have something that's
how do you budget
encounter and the encounter has other complications, that may be your one encounter, and then you don't have side things like extra social bits or other like hazards or things like that. A great thing to do is to play test your adventures. So please playtest your adventures. As developers, we do not have time to playtest adventures. So if you authors do not playtest your adventures, those adventures will not get playtested. They will just be getting developed based on our experience. And while we have a fair amount of experience in particularly first edition adventures and then Thirsty and Starfighter adventures, we don't have time to playtest. So we're not going to catch everything. And authors playtesting is really awesome to check the length and to catch other little bits. And if you're writing for us, our outlines sort of specify like that you can share your adventures with people, not super broadly, but just make sure they all know they're people you trust not to spoil the context of the adventure before it comes out. So where was I? I was talking about different types of encounters. You're talking about what the major
encounter is, how much it budgets, what a minor encounter is, how much it budgets.
Yeah. So that's the sort of different types of encounters. You're also going to have quests are going to have less treasure than scenarios, and you'll generally be looking at, since a quest is about 1/4 of the length of a scenario, you'll be looking at about 1/4 of the treasure for your quest spread out over any number of the encounter areas as well.
So if you were going to give out like a +1 weapon rune, you could give out 1/4 of a +1 weapon rune, and then they find the other pieces in the other quests and put it together.
Well, I suppose you could do something like that if you had a quest pack, but we're really moving away from the quest pack model.
With the single quest, you don't want them to have to wait.
You don't want them to have to wait to finish their rewards. So you're going to want to be looking at rewards that are worth about 1/4 of that value. So that would mean probably looking at some mundane items or consumables. If you're in I'm talking from a second edition perspective, looking at mundane items and consumables, or looking at magic items that are lower level.
That makes sense.
So
are those all the pieces of a quest?
Those are most of the pieces of the quest. So let me just scroll to the end here so that I can answer.
Is there just like the finishing the adventure?
There's finishing the adventure. So there's a conclusion where you sort of wrap it up and you talk about you're going to want to talk about how does the adventure captain and other rocket lettuce. Hazard 3, culinary evil acid. Perception DC 19 to notice vinaigrette of 2. 48 acid damage, and taste becomes a precise sense for 24 hours. That's amazing. Okay. Thank you, Rocket Lettuce. That is amazing. All right.
There you go. You know what writing sample to submit.
There's a writing sample from Rocket Lettuce. So
Make the developer laugh out loud.
yes, humor has a very important function in writing as well. Particularly, Starfinder Society tends to go more for the humor, whereas Pathfinder Society tends to be more serious at times and things like that. But for real though, Rocket Lettuce, we'd be looking for a sample that shows for organized play. We'd be looking for a sample that shows. That would be an example of rules design, mechanics design, your hazard.
It shows knowledge of precise senses.
It shows knowledge of precise senses. We'd also be looking for something that shows what your prose looks like, to give a serious answer to a somewhat joking comment. So where were we? We were at conclusions.
Conclusion.
So the conclusion, you're going to want to have the wrap up. So the PCs are likely to how do NPCs react to in the end react to the PC's actions? How does the adventure captain react to the PC's actions? How do the PCs get back home? And sort of what happens if the PCs succeed, and what happens if the PCs fail, are sort of the two broad categories. But there are also likely to be other categories, particularly in scenarios, but you may see this in quests instead. So like if the PCs succeeded the main mission, if the PCs made an ally of this NPC. Basically, what kind of information is the GM going to need to know to answer the PC's questions and bring the adventure to a satisfying conclusion? We also have two more pieces here. We have reporting notes, which is a way for your adventure to convey information that could be useful in future adventures. So, for example, if the PCs may befriend an NPC or defeat them or kill them, then you might, and that NPC is someone that you might see showing up in later adventures. Then you might put a thing where it says that if the PCs befriended, if the PCs decided to become a vinaigrette specialist after Rocket Lettuce's scenario, checkbox A. If they decided that they hated vinaigrette and they never wanted to have it again after tasting it on the dungeon walls, checkbox B or whatever. So basically, anytime that you have these choice points, those reporting conditions could be used for choice points, and they could also be used for sort of successes. So if it's really consequential whether or not the PC succeeded at a certain thing. And generally for these, we're going to want to have the yes and no, because not everyone's going to check their reporting boxes. When we look at the reporting data, you can see that generally about 2/3 of tables will check reporting boxes, and about 5% of tables will check reporting boxes that are not options. So it'll be like checkbox A if this, checkbox B if this. About 5% of tables will check C and D. So we know there's some noise in this data as well. So it's good to have the sort of this or this. And this is something we can do in development too. You don't have to do it as an author, but I'm just saying it because, yeah.
That makes sense.
And then finally you have the success conditions, or objectives as they're called. A quest will generally just have a primary objective that's sort of the main thing you're trying to do. In scenarios, you'll also have secondary objectives. The primary objective is basically, did you do the main thing that you were supposed to do, the adventure captain asked in the beginning of the mission? Secondary objectives, when they appear, which they don't in quests, are did you do that thing with finesse? Did you collect the pieces of lore? Did you befriend this NPC? Did you do this certain thing quickly? Did you make the Pathfinder Society look good while doing it in these ways? So secondary objectives may be one simple thing, yes or no. My favorite types of secondary objectives are the sort of menu of options secondary objectives, and these obviously wouldn't fit in quests, but you don't have secondary objectives in quests anyway.
Did you do 4 of these 6 things?
Exactly. Did you do 4 of these 6 things? So that way the PCs can show success, but if they miss one thing, they're not going to miss out on it. So that helps get a more holistic picture of how the PCs have done. And then everything after that is something that your developer is going to be generally going to be working on. You're going to have your appendices, with stat blocks, which those are a little different now in second edition adventures, where we're going to be seeing you're going to see stuff more consolidated for that. And I think
that should make it easier to run.
That should make it easier to run as well. I don't want to get into the full details on that for non-authors because this is something that we're probably going to be talking about in upcoming blogs. And if you're writing something, you will get our scenario design guide, which has a sample scenario that's all laid out in all of our styles and things like that, and it also tells you what each section is going to be. So all of this, if you're writing a scenario, is going to be fully laid out for you. Also, we encourage authors to ask us questions throughout the process, any that you have. So I think that pretty much covers.
Oh, look, we have some pros to go with the
It was
the
a dark and stormy night.
Based on your information about Starfinder being the silly one.
It was quite all serious and nothing science fiction was happening at all.
There you go.
Oh my goodness. So yeah. I think
there's also a question about what length for writing sample. Should it just be like 2 sentences? Should it be a 50-page novel?
So it needs to be something that we can read in a reasonable amount of time. So the quest length of about 2,000 words is great because it's enough for us to read. I would say like sort of 1,000 to 3,000 words is good because we're not going to have time to read something longer than that. And I also do want to point out that while I am doing the terrifying thing of making an open call, I mean,
it's not exactly an open call.
It's not an open call.
Just for the Arcane Bar community.
That's true. It's only a call to the Arcane Bar community. But
an open call is open.
It's not like going to be published online in a broader sense because we don't have time to review all that. Because we did our open call for Pathfinder Society open call for quests, and that was open for a long time. And people didn't necessarily hear back about that. So then what we did for that is we selected our top. We had 2 candidates from that who really stood out, and they ended up being 2 of our authors for the What the Helms Hide quest series. So we pretty much cleared through that existing open call. So when we do open an open call again in the future, this is something we very much want to do, but we have so many things that have to get done, particularly with the launch of 2nd edition and sort of all this other stuff that's going on, that we have to make sure we always bite off more than we can chew. But we need to make sure that we keep it as just like a little more than we can chew, and not like, oh God, we're gonna have panic attacks about everything that has to get done. So open call is very much something that we would like to reopen in the future, but we don't have a planned date for that. So it's more in terms of sending in references. So basically, yeah, 1,000 to 3,000 words is great. And also if you have if you can make a list of like other products that you've worked for in the past, other companies you've worked for in the past. Hey, I did this thing with this third party. If you've ever worked with any of the Paizo folks in the past, then let me know that, because then I can go to them and be like, hey, do you have a writing sample from this person? What did you think about working with them? Things like that. So because we all talk to each other about the freelancers that we work with and things like that. So that'll help out in terms of getting your name out there and stuff like that. And if you don't have professional writing experience in the past, if you haven't written for any third party, things like that, or if you don't have, so let us know also your Pathfinder Society experience, or Starfinder Society experience, or Adventure Card experience, whatever program you're looking to write for. But if you don't have those types of things, it's a good idea to get that experience first, because likely if you don't have stuff to show us, we're going to say, hey, that's awesome, but please get more experience.
And it can't be easier to get experience with organized play. Plus, it's easier than you think, even though I didn't find this out until I thought, like, oh man, I have to do so much to be with third-party publishers. But a lot of them, like, if you know what you want to write and you're going to write it, they're like, okay, yeah, write that. We'll lay it out. We'll do that.
Luis has some great advice here. For orc play, an encounter is actually a great sample because you can attach a map to show your map drawing chops. An encounter
he also said usually a 1-page max, a monster with flavor, a few magic items with some flavor, a good sample, or even a very short encounter area.
Yeah.
Oh, and considering Warlock says maybe I should pester Owen for third-party stuff. Owen's
going to be on?
He's going to be on Thursday, and he always wants pitches. He will take pitches. In fact, he's been known for things where he could talk you into just almost anything when you ask for pitches. There was someone, I can't remember who was saying that they went to Owen and they said, Owen, I'd really like to write anything except for, and then they gave one topic that they were like, that they didn't want to write. And Owen's like, but what if you did the thing that you didn't want to write in this way? And then the person was like, actually, I would want to write that then. And so he even got someone to write the one thing that they didn't want to write.
Yeah. So yeah, and then Louis has a good point with the short encounter area, 1 page and things like that. If what you pitch, what you send over is something more like 3,000 words, I'm not going to be reading all of it. It's just like if you already have a sample that's longer, like that's fine. I'll just try to take a look at the thing. But one encounter is really actually perfect.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we've done a lot of good service with some freelancer tips in addition to talking about the anatomy of a quest. But there is another category of people who we're also talking at the beginning, which is just starting out Pathfinder Society folks or people who want to run quests. Linda, what kind of advice can you give to people about the sort of the idea and concept of using a quest as a recruitment tool, running anything in a 1 hour slot that you kind of have to fit into a smaller slot.
Yeah. So if you're using Quest as a recruitment tool, that means you're going to have some new players. You're going to have higher density of new players in Quest than you are going to in standard scenarios. So these people. So I guess I'm getting a little bit into new player introduction, but also new player introduction when you're on a shorter time scale. So new players, you want to make sure that you keep the excitement high and that you keep the focus of how they learn active and through the actions of the adventure, rather than being like, let us all sit down for 20 minutes while I read to you these obscure things from the rulebook. You don't want players to have to internalize everything. So
grapple checks
work exactly like this. So generally you would have you would want them to sort of ask them what their experience is with role playing games and like if they've played. And so then you can kind of get a sense of what they've played before, because the introduction that you give to someone who's like, what is this thing that you were doing with dice is very different from the introduction that you give to someone who's like, oh, well, I haven't played I haven't played second edition before, but I was an avid player in the playtest, and I'm a 5-star GM in Pathfinder Society and a 3 Novas in Starfinder Society, and I have been playing tabletop role-playing games for the last 30 years. So the kind of introduction those people are going to need is very different. But if you're starting with the brand new player, I mean, actually, I think this could honestly be a full topic for another episode. Like, how do you introduce
that could be part of New Beginnings episode also, which by the way is now winning 6-5 to 3.
Oh yeah, we can talk about that as part of
that
would be perfect to include in New Beginnings. But just sort of in general, providing the basic information, which I generally consider to be that that it's a collaborative game, storytelling game where everyone works together to achieve various goals that are set before them. All the players work together.
BYOV. Bring your own vinaigrette.
Oh, Jesus. We wouldn't be so distractible. Ferendor says that we're good peeps, even if easy to distract. But you guys keep saying funny and interesting things we want to respond to.
Squirrel!
Stop it, squirrel. Okay. Anyway.
Oh, considering Warlock says we should put an episode on playtesting is one of the possible options. That sounds like a good idea. Maybe we'll do that. Maybe we'll put it in as a possible option on the next poll.
Yeah, so that would be cool. So anyway, before we got into the squirrels, what was I saying?
We were talking about getting new players in, using Quest as a recruitment tool, and just the idea of as a GM, not an author, how do I do this in 1 hour?
Okay,
how do I make sure that this... Actually, maybe we shouldn't ask you how to run something in 1 hour.
God damn it, Mark. So I am a GM.
Linda and John are both infamous for taking so long. Like, John was once kicked out of a game store and just ran it in the street outside of the game store to complete the adventure.
True facts about John Compton. But anyway, so like I was saying, the idea that it's a collaborative storytelling game. Everyone's working together. You can have your character sort of, you say what your character wants to do, and then the game master or GM who's running the game and presenting the various challenges will tell you what kind of thing you need to roll. Generally, you're going to be rolling a 20-sided dice or D20 and adding a bonus that represents a bonus number that represents how good you are at the thing that you're trying to do. And then I sort of direct them toward their character sheet, because they're using a pre-generated character sheet at that point, and say, like, different characters have different special abilities. So, for example, if they have Kyra, I'll be like, hey, you have Kyra, that means that you can fight with the scimitar in combat. You have some spells that you can cast that are listed here on your sheet. So, for example, you have Cure Light Wounds that you can use to heal your allies. You have Kyra? You have blasts that you can use to bolster the accuracy
Fire
of your
ray.
eyes. You have fire rays that you can shoot at your enemies, and you can call forth a burst of holy energy to heal your allies. So what I'd be looking at is, I'm not going to go through and be like, ah yes, well you have the diplomacy skill, which means this. I generally, for the new players, try to keep it basically at the let me know what you want to do. You roll a 20-sided die, add a bonus that's based on how good you are at the thing. And then if they say like, oh, I want to do this, what would I use for that? Then I'd say like, oh, you're talking to them in a friendly way. That's diplomacy and things like that. And so if I have new players, I will explain more when things are happening. Like if someone's like, oh yeah, I want to pick the lock, and then they roll a check, I'd be like, oh yeah, this person's rolling a disable device check because they are attempting to pick a lock. And I would then use that point to give a little more context as opposed to explaining things up front. So that's kind of my keep it quick for new players, and get them introduced. So yeah, I would say keep that in mind. Another thing to always say is that you are available to answer questions, and that you welcome questions during the game. If you are in a short timetable, particularly with a quest, you may want to pick an experienced player at your table to be the delegated answerer for certain questions. You would have to know like that person is okay with that, but just sort of then it's like you can ask me or you can ask them, and that way they can quietly ask questions and get answers while you are continuing with the adventure. Because sometimes new players in particular feel daunted or intimidated by the idea of interrupting the GM's flow to ask questions. So having that other delegated person can help.
All right, there's an idea in the chat for apparently earlier that we missed because it seems like a reference to an earlier one for a balsamic vinaigrette dragon as an emoji.
How do we get it? Can you come up with a way to convey a balsamic vinaigrette dragon in a 28 by 28 pixel?
It could just generally be a dragon that could be not that, as long as the emoji name is vinaigrette dragon or something.
Oh yeah, we could have
people will have to know when they type in vinaigrette. Mark said vinaigrette dragon.
So it's kind of just got like this brownish black like breath.
I don't know.
Bottle of vinaigrette with little dragon wings. What is the improvised weapon damage of an enlarged crouton? Depends. Is it from gold? Well, I mean, what is the base damage of a crouton, right? I mean, I feel like a crouton would probably only be 1 damage because it's like this really tiny little thing. So what, 1 goes to 1d2? Is that...
Well, in PF2, we try not to use those extra small damage dice at all, but...
So how would...
But yes, in the most fact that ever was fact, it's like 1, 1d2, 1d3, 1d4, 1d6, 1d8, 2d6, 3d6, 4d6, 66, etc. Except for if you wind up getting on the wrong track with 1d10, it goes 2d8, 3d8, 4d8, 68, etc.
Rocket Lettuce says, we don't have problems interrupting the GM flow on this chat. That is true, but it is so much more fun because otherwise we'd basically just be sitting here having a conversation about things we already know, and like, yeah, that's not fun. We want to talk to you guys. We want to engage you.
There we go. The rune slot can be Ranch, Caesar, or Thousand Island. All right.
Now I want salad. Damn it, guys. All right. I'm probably going to get salad after this stream. But...
Okay.
So, did you have any other questions for me about quests, Mark, or
okay,
chat?
So we talked about new players. We talked about, like, the idea that it's a 1 hour... So what does that mean about, like, the way that the GM paces rising action and falling action, real quick?
Yeah, so the rise and the fall are going to be fairly rapid in this because you have the one, you generally have the one encounter with sort of those side things that may exist. If there are side things like hazards and things like that, they should go before the main encounter, so that you sort of have here's our introduction. Okay, we're here. Stuff is starting to go bad. Oh, we fight the giant monster, and then we have the conclusion. That's kind of how it goes. The pacing is sort of inherent in the structure of the adventure, just because there aren't that many pieces to it. But definitely keeping things moving.
Is vinaigrette connected to vital essence? I don't know. Probably not, since it's just. Well, but vital is a vital material.
Vital plus material is primal. I remember it, yeah.
I feel like vinaigrette is no longer alive, so it's probably material.
Material essence? Yeah.
All right. So, I think we covered a lot of facts about quests
Cover the
here.
structure of the
And
quest, how to get into
you
writing
asked
quests.
for some extra questions, and there haven't been any particular new ones except for one quest a month, the plan for society, and I answered in chat. Assuming the budget remains, yes, at least for 2019 for sure.
Yeah, we're looking for ways to ensure that we continue to have quests.
All right. So seems like we have transgressed this quest with finesse for any Dragon Quest IX players. So,
and if you like Dragon Quest Builders 2 is coming out soon and is being localized soon to. It's like Dragon Quest plus Minecraft.
But what about Vinaigrette Dragon Quest?
Vinaigrette Dragon Quest?
Yes.
I mean, you could pretend that the dragon's a vinaigrette dragon, but it's really less friendly like that than that.
All right. So, Kylie said that there is a formatting doc. Is that available online prior to submitting the writing sample, or is it a catch-22 where it's like, haha, your writing sample did not follow our formatting doc that you did not have?
So it's not available online, and for that reason, formatting is not part of what we is not generally part of what we observe. If you do sort of generally try to mimic the pattern of an existing quest in terms, but so the formatting is like these styles. Like those styles that you put into Word that then get converted through our InDesign documents and go online. So if you just sort of mimic the general pattern of an existing quest, then it'll be like, hey, cool, they're looking to mimic the general pattern of existing quests, but we're not going to dock anything for that. That's not part of what we look for if you don't have that information.
Nitrace wonders in Pathfinder Society if the writers suggest rewards for the Chronicle sheets, or do developers just come up with them themselves entirely?
Generally, developers come up with them themselves entirely because suggesting Chronicle rewards is not part of the word count. However, if you happen
if you
to
want to not be paid for it, then you
can. If you want to suggest something to us, like, we're always open to suggestions, but we certainly don't expect it because it's not part of what you're getting paid for.
Farandor says series of a few quests are better for their slot because one quest is not the right amount of time for Farandor. And I'm guessing Farandor that a scenario is a little bit too long. So having multiple is good for that venue.
Mm-hmm. Well, you could run multiple of them in the same thing just because they're not necessarily plot connected, but there'd be nothing to stop you from running those. Or you can, or we've got the packet ones for First Edition and for Starfinder Society. You might want to check out the Starfinder Society ones in that case.
Do you want all submissions to include mimics?
No.
Okay. Sorry, Brian.
It could include a mimic, but the danger of a lot of people all doing the same thing is that it makes it much easier to do the point-by-point comparison. So then, like, sort of there's this sense of, like, okay, well, we may be looking more at the best mimic encounter because we'll always be thinking in the back of our minds about that slightly better mimic encounter, and it's not as much of a way to show your creativity. So, yes, you can do one that includes mimics. I just don't recommend everyone doing, like, the same kind of thing.
So Kylie says that their first submission goalpost has always been follow the damn guidelines. I'm going to say that's a really good goalpost, and you might think it's a trollishly low goalpost to follow the instructions, but I'm going to tell you, some of the best freelancers in the industry just don't always follow them. For example, and I'll embarrass him because it's in a positive way, the person I'm embarrassing is not going to be the first name I give. I'll tell you who I'm embarrassing. But, so Steven, who is not who I'm embarrassing, changed the guidelines for the RPG line from what Sean had written a while before, and Steven was like, this isn't updated, we never updated, I'm going to update it, and some of this is going to change. And he told every freelancer on that book that it changed, and that they need to read it again. And only Miko Kalia read it, which we know because only he followed the things that were new in that one that were not in Sean's. Everyone else did follow the guidelines from Sean's from before, that they knew from before. So reading the instructions and following them correctly,
even if you've written for us before, please review the instructions. Things do change.
Is super smart thing to do, and it's not as trollishly low of a bar as you think. Because
a lot of people don't follow directions. Even in the open call submissions, we had a fair number of people who didn't follow directions, and if they didn't follow directions, then we just put them in a DQ pile because
even brilliant people, amazing writers, great designers, don't always follow the instructions. So that might make you special in a different way if you're the person who follows the directions. Nitrate says their work on with other products has shown them that. All right. So, Farandor is talking about a mix and match style with quests. The packs together could be as long as scenario after squirrel effect, so not as useful. But a mix and match means it can take exactly as long as Farandor needs.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So very cool.
It sounds like we have gotten off into a little bit of squirrel territory.
So
and,
let's say goodbye to YouTube,
yeah.
and then do a little bit more of a recap for people who joined us in Twitch after the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So bye YouTube. See you on Tuesday.
Bye.